Hi, I'm Tony and welcome to another tried and tested review. As you all know, if you've watched my channel before, I love pretty much all types of bikes. So as the growth of electric motorcycles has been picking up over the recent years, so has my interest. Although I will admit to being a bit of a skeptic, that's not because I'm a Luddite, but because there are certain emotional elements to riding bikes that I love and I think are all part of the experience. I was lucky that Zero gave me an opportunity to spend some time with their DSR Blackforest edition. So this video is not so much a pure review of that model, although there is obviously some of that in it, but more of a window to my first experience with an electric bike. It covers my initial thoughts, pros and cons, that sort of thing. Sadly, after returning the bike, I discovered a few audio issues, so apologies in advance for that, and I've tried to minimise that as much as possible.
Right, so before we get into this, switch the bike on. It goes through its little phase. I've got a little green light flashing, and there we are. And I'll talk through this later on, but basically it's showing me how much battery I've got charged, what that kind of range is, and then your various settings. First thing you notice, this bike is now ready to go. The side stands up. Obviously if the side stands down, then the thing won't move. The throttle becomes inactive, but now sitting here silently, we're ready to go. There's no traction control on the bike at all, so what this eco mode does is just give you a nice gentle acceleration. It delivers the power slower than it would do in the other modes, and it's on maximum regeneration. So as you come off the throttle and brake, you get regeneration of the battery to try and add a bit of range, and there is a hard speed limit at 70 miles an hour, so this will max out at 70 miles an hour in eco mode. It's the mode you want to use if you're just trying to preserve the battery as much as you can, and or if the weather's a bit tricky, you don't want all of that power coming in straight away. Right, so one of the things that you do notice when you jump on these is you become slightly obsessed with the battery and the range meter, because you're always concerned that you're not going to get there. And the thing you'll find is once you know you've got plenty of range for what you need, you tend to ignore that a little bit, but initially it is something that occupies your mind quite a bit. So we're in eco mode. It is, as I say, the softest delivery. I'll show you what eco mode is like and then the other modes as well. So as you can see, nice gentle pull away. Even if I turn the grip full on, it's just slowly building up the power. There's nothing snatchy about it. And so for the first time on an electric bike, it's a good mode to use, and it was quite a nice one for me to get used to it. You can get caught out, particularly as there's no traction control on this bike. So I did an overtake the other day on a damp road, and I kind of overtook as I would do on my normal bike. All the power's delivered, and I've got a snaking green tyre, so it's just something you have to kind of get used to as you're riding. But as you can see, the power delivery is instant. It is good. Once you're up and rolling on this, you can roll on the throttle, you get a nice push on of power. There's a mode button on the left here. If you press that, we'll go from eco to custom. You can connect your phone to this and make all the custom settings. You have got selection buttons and adjustment down here that you can use, but to be honest, it's much easier to connect your phone and then set that up, so you can dial in the power and the torque and the speed and everything else that you want in that custom setting. And once you've been riding the bike for a while, you'll kind of find the best setting for that. The other mode is sport, and sport is kind of everything all on in one go. So I'll give you an example of that. If I was to give it full beans, you're kind of straight into full power. There's no upper speed limit on this, so the bike will hit its maximum speed, which is about 100 miles an hour. But you have got that instant torque and that pull as soon as you want it to pull on the throttle, and it really does accelerate very quickly. You could very happily worry quite a few other bikes if you were facing a drag race, and to do it with an almost silent motor is really funny. It does freak them out a little bit. In these kind of conditions, you've just got to be a little bit careful, particularly with these kind of semi-knobbly tyres that we've got on the bike. And you can change these modes on the fly. Quick press like that, again that's back into eco. I have to say I've been relatively impressed with the ride quality so far. It's got shower adjustable forks up front, it's got a fully adjustable shock at the rear, so you can play around with those to your heart's content and get set up as you want. And it's quite a sort of smallish compact bike, which is nice actually for this, which is supposedly their adventure bike, although we'll touch on that later when we start talking about one of the biggest elephants in the room with electric vehicles. But it's kind of manoeuvrable, you can get your feet on the floor easily. It's not a tall bike. The one thing I did notice is the side stand probably be a little bit longer. It does lean over quite unnervingly when you put it on the side stand. You've got a screen here with a little adjustable visor. To be honest, the screen does very little. I suppose it does stop the wind from your chest, but I've noticed all it seems to do is send all of the road grime and crap straight onto your visor. So I find I'm having to clear my visor quite frequently with this. It's getting used to that noise. If you're somebody of my age who grew up, the thing that it instantly reminds me of as soon as I jump on it is a milk float. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, but it's just that noise from my childhood of hearing a milk float coming down the road, and it is very similar. And that's another thing I think that is worth talking about, because one of the things that I enjoy about bikes is that whole visceral experience of the smell and the noise and the heat, and you kind of miss out on some of that. So it's got pros and cons. Now a lot of people will say one of the big problems with the bike is it doesn't make any noise, and they're worried about that people in cars won't hear you, and I kind of understand that, but I also kind of think, given how well insulated modern cars are these days, I'm not entirely sure how much of a bike, unless you've got a really obnoxiously loud exhaust, I'm not entirely sure how much people hear your bike in modern cars. Certainly when you're filtering, which is one of the excuses that people give. I'll just stop and let this driver come through. One of the excuses that people often give is, well, I need to know loud about when I'm filtering. But anybody that drives will notice you don't really hear that bike coming until it's right beside you. So if you are going to change lanes and you're not looking in your mirrors, then the bike's beside you by the time you decided to do that anyway. So yes, I do think that there is an element of that that's true, but I don't think it's as much as people make out. I think the bigger issue is going to be in town with pedestrians, because pedestrians use their ears a lot. We've got used to this noise of internal combustion engines, so when you're crossing the road, subconsciously you're already listening for something before you start to sort of look and glance your eyes across, and I guess that could be the problem. Obviously there is a legislation, it looks like, coming in to say that vehicles need to be making a noise under a speed limit. I think it's 15 miles an hour. Bit of a grey area as to whether that's actually crossing over onto bikes, but yeah, that's the only time I think the quiet thing could create a problem. But it has its benefits as well. If you want to use one of these off-road, and Zero do make a sort of lighter weight trail kind of bike version, and that's quite nice because you're not going to disturb wildlife, you're not going to upset horses or dog walkers and the likes. You find when you ride these bikes, if you're going any distance, it's just a case of doing more planning. You've got to work out where your charging points are. So if you know you're going to be doing more than 100 miles, you've got to work out where your charging points are. You've got to be able to stop and take the time to actually get them charged. And you're roughly looking at each 1% of the battery is giving you 1 mile of range, which is a rough and ready estimate, depending on how you're riding it, to know how much to charge it through. And I'll go and visit a charging site and show you what that's all about. So, as I talked about earlier, this is one of the problems that you've got. I've found a charging point. I've got in here my cable ready to plug into here and into here, but it's not one of the charging points that I've already got an app for. So that means downloading another app, entering all your details, putting credit on before you can get to charge. So again, that's one of the big issues. Too many suppliers, although the switch is uniform, sorry, the plug is uniform,
It's just another one of those pains. So I would show you the charging process, but it is basically connecting your mobile phone and your app to that machine over there, getting it set up, plugging the cable in here, walking away and leaving it. I'm not going to do that now because I don't need to charge. I'm close enough to home and I can't be bothered to download yet another app for it. So yeah, not really much of a problem. It's just something else you have to consider. And quite often the charging points that are in places like this, it makes sense here. Park and ride, you can drive here, you can see other cars, plug in, go to work, come back, your car's charged up. And there's your myriad of chargers. This is the charger that comes with the bike, standard 3-pin plug, and that little plug on the side there plugged into there. It's the slowest way of charging it. It's about 8 hours to fully charge it, but it's good in case of emergency if you really are struggling for power. Anyway, you find that it's got an outdoor 3-pin plug will work. The orange one is again for home use, 3-pin plug on that, but will charge a little bit faster. And then for charging stations like this one, you use the white connector, and that will charge 7 kilowatts hour from empty in about 4 hours. Obviously, if you are in sport mode, your battery range is not going to be as great as it would be in the eco. You're going to chew through that battery, so your range of 100 miles in sport mode, if you're hammering it around, you know, you're going to cut that back quite significantly. And you do see changes in this based on the weather as well. So I'm steaming up a bit here, let's go. So you do see changes based on the weather as well. So when it's cold as it is today, that's going to take, you know, 10% of the range out of the bike. And again, with the luggage that was on here, the drag and the extra weight, that's going to probably take another 10% out. But you soon sort of learn quite quickly how to ride these. And as I say, I rode it back from Peterborough. Most of the riding I did back from Peterborough was in eco mode. Oh, those tyres are not that great. So most of the riding I did was in eco mode, and you know, I didn't go above 70 miles an hour. I was going cross country. Most of the roads were 50-60 miles an hour, and that made sure I just had the maximum amount of range. And again, this is one of the beauties of the electric one. I'm not annoying anybody. I'm not going to upset farmers. And it means that if I do come across a walker or a horse, as soon as I stop and shut off, the bike is not making any noise, and it's not going to spook anybody. But certainly in eco mode, for this sort of stuff, it's great because it does dull it down. You're not going to start spinning up the tyres too dramatically if you would do in full-on sport. And obviously in the custom mode you can set it up to suit what you're doing. But so the majority of these bikes are not going to be ridden on these sort of conditions, although this is supposedly an adventure bike. So I tried to keep the video as concise as I could, but there were quite a few observations that I needed to make. First off, the bike. It's a well-built, enjoyable and incredibly easy machine to ride. In eco mode, it's soft and unintimidating, whereas sport mode, as you can imagine, needs a little bit more care because of the way that the power is delivered from these electric motors. In general, the bike is comfortable, manageable and fun. In broader terms, and to answer the question, are electric bikes ready for the mainstream? Well, yes and no. My personal experience is that if you want a bike for a quick hoon around on the weekend, you have a reasonable commute, or you travel or live in a city, they make perfect sense. For my kind of riding, that includes the short fun stuff as well as some longer distance hauls, it makes less sense. Where we've got used to riding a bike until the tank runs low, then looking for a place to fill up and going on our way, electric bikes pose a different challenge. First of all, although the network is growing rapidly, there are not as many charging stations as you may think. Add to that, there are quite a few different providers, each of which requires its own app and account. Not a big hurdle to overcome, but it can be tiresome. A lot gets spoken about the range of these bikes being limited, and I can see that if you want to do big days in the saddle. However, I think range itself is a bit of a red herring. I have a friend who used to ride a custom Harley 48, and he would be looking for fuel after about 70 or 80 miles, but it never stopped him taking on day-long rides. For me, charging is the key. If a bike could be charged fully in 10 to 15 minutes, and there were charging points in pretty much every petrol or gas station, then the range argument would disappear. Putting aside the noise, vibration, heat, cost, and of course emission arguments on both sides, I think it's the availability and the speed of charging that is the real hurdle for electric bikes to overcome before they become mainstream. Now, I always ask people to comment on my videos, with mixed success to be fair, but I'd be really interested to hear your views on the subject and maybe get a good constructive discussion going. Electric bikes will be the future, unless the hydrogen fuel cell idea gets a move on, of course, but for me and how I ride and for what I want, they are not the present. I do, however, look forward to seeing the technology and infrastructure around it progress. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. If you like what I do and you want to support the channel, the best way to do that is click that subscribe button and click that like button. And until next time, all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching. Take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.